Are five emerging giants quietly shaking your financial foundation? Find out now as we uncover the real story behind BRICS and your money. Hello, and welcome to today's deep dive into one of the most controversial economic topics swirling around the global stage right now. The influence of the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and the looming question on everyone's mind: are they actually stealing your money? That's a bold accusation, but it's one that keeps popping up in countless discussions, news articles, and online forums. Some say it's just hype, while others warn that something major is happening behind the scenes. So, in this video, I'm challenging myself and all of you to take a closer look at the facts, the fears, and the possibilities connected to BRICS. Now, I know what you might be thinking. How can a coalition of nations on the other side of the world possibly reach into my bank account? That's a fair question. And it's exactly why we need to break down how global economic policies can have ripple effects that span continents. The BRICS nations are not just any group of countries. Over the past few decades, they've combined their efforts to become a powerful economic force. Together, they represent a massive portion of the world's population, land, and resources. But beyond those basic stats, they've also been steadily growing their influence in international trade, finance, and technology. While many see this as a balanced step toward a more diverse global economy, there's also a growing unease that these nations might leverage their power in ways that hurt people outside their borders. Let's begin by reviewing a bit of background. BRICS took shape in the early 2000s as a concept proposed by economists who saw these five nations as rising powers. Over time, official summits and partnerships turned that concept into a real entity. At first, BRICS was framed as a way for these countries to collaborate economically, share resources, and push for reforms in global financial institutions. According to some experts, this approach was supposed to give emerging economies a bigger voice, helping reduce the dominance of the wealthiest Western nations. In theory, that sounds fair. But as with any major shift in power, there are bound to be concerns, especially when decisions made in one corner of the world can echo everywhere else. One core worry that keeps popping up involves currency manipulation. When people talk about currency manipulation, they're often pointing to policies or actions that artificially influence the exchange rates of national currencies. In some cases, governments might devalue their currency on purpose to boost exports. This is because a weaker currency can make a country's goods cheaper on the international market. But while that can be great for local industries, it can also harm competitors abroad who suddenly can't match those low prices. Critics point out that such practices can set off a chain reaction, causing other nations to tweak their own monetary policies in retaliation. Ultimately, everyday people might feel the brunt of it. Think higher costs for imported goods, shifts in interest rates, or turbulence in the stock market. The question is, to what extent are BRICS nations partaking in these practices? And how much does that trickle down to your wallet? Next, let's talk about trade practices. BRICS countries have been criticized for forming alliances or deals that seem to favor their own exports and businesses, sometimes at the expense of foreign competitors. These tactics might include protective tariffs, exclusive trade agreements, or even subtle logistical barriers that make it hard for other countries to compete. Naturally, every country wants to protect its interests, but the main fear surrounding BRICS is that these five countries acting together might tilt the playing field so drastically that it destabilizes global trade norms. If you live in a country that's heavily dependent on certain exports, shifts in trade alliances can directly affect job markets, wages, and the cost of consumer goods. It's easy to see why people might view these moves as unfair or even predatory. Then, there's the element of geopolitical strategy. Let's face it, economics and politics are deeply intertwined. BRICS doesn't exist in a vacuum. Its member nations have political aims and alliances that can reshape the way they approach trade or financial decisions. Take, for instance, the issue of sanctions. Whenever there's a global conflict or diplomatic standoff, sanctions often become a key weapon in international relations. A BRICS nation facing sanctions from Western powers might respond by forging stronger ties with its fellow BRICS partners. This could create new trade channels designed specifically to bypass the usual global financial systems. While this might help the sanctioned country, it could also undermine established economic rules that most other nations abide by. When these rules get bent or broken, investors and regular folks can be left dealing with the aftermath, like currency devaluation or unreliable markets. One real-world example that startled many observers was the sudden devaluation of certain currencies in the face of sanctions or political tensions. You're an investor, and a crisis erupts in one of the BRICS nations. In response to international pressure, that nation decides to weaken its currency so its exports remain competitive or so it can stabilize its economy under stress. This decision can send shockwaves across global markets, especially if investors quickly start pulling out their money, worried about the fallout. Such drastic moves can erode confidence, drive up inflation, or cause the prices of everyday goods to shoot up. And even if you don't invest in foreign markets, you might still feel the pinch if your local businesses rely on imports or exports that are suddenly hit by currency swings. Beyond these immediate concerns, there's a deeper, more subtle question. Is BRICS intentionally orchestrating these events to steal from people abroad? Or is this just the natural consequence of nations protecting their interests? The word stealing is strong and implies deliberate wrongdoing. But in global economics, many actions that seem intentional can also be viewed as standard political and financial self-defense. When the US or European Union impose tariffs, they are often acting on the same impulse, protecting domestic industries. So, is BRICS really doing something more sinister? Or are they simply playing the same game that powerful Western countries have played for decades? This leads us to a wider conversation about power dynamics in global finance. For decades, Western nations and institutions like the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank have had a huge influence on how the global economy is structured. Critics have long argued that these institutions sometimes enact policies favoring wealthier nations, leaving developing countries in tough positions. BRICS members have frequently called for reforms to these institutions. They've even started building their own parallel structures, such as the New Development Bank, designed to serve the interests of emerging economies. This move is seen by some as a direct challenge to the established world order. By creating their own financial institutions, BRICS nations might be aiming for more autonomy. But skeptics worry about the lack of checks and balances that come with historically recognized bodies like the IMF. It's this tug-of-war between the established global powers and the rising powers that fuels a lot of the fear. When people say BRICS is stealing from them, they often mean they are worried that the usual economic safety nets or transparent structures might not work the same way anymore. If BRICS influences currency markets, trade practices, and geopolitical alliances to the point where it shifts the entire financial landscape, individuals around the world might find their jobs, savings, and investments at greater risk. Let's also explore the debate from the other side. Many proponents of BRICS argue that the group is merely leveling the playing field by offering alternatives to Western-dominated systems. They contend that far from stealing anyone's money, BRICS is creating more choices for trade, investment, and development. For instance, if you're a country that's been historically dependent on loans from Western institutions with strict conditions, you might benefit from a BRICS-led development bank that provides more flexible terms. This could help build infrastructure, create jobs, and boost the local economy. From this perspective, BRICS might not be a threat, but rather a necessary balance in a world that has long been tilted toward a few major powers. Still, the real fear remains that, in the quest for that balance, some individuals, especially those far outside BRICS' sphere, may be left financially vulnerable. Consider the average consumer in a Western country. Suppose supply chains shift to favor BRICS nations, making certain products more expensive or harder to find. Or imagine you work in an industry that has to compete directly with cheaper imports from a BRICS partner. If local factories can't keep up, jobs can vanish. It's all intertwined in a web of cause and effect, where a single strategic move in a BRICS capital can set off a domino effect impacting your local supermarket prices. To make sense of these possibilities, financial analysts often recommend staying informed and diversifying your assets. Why diversification? Because if you have all your money in one place, like a single stock market or currency, shifts in the global landscape could put your entire nest egg at risk. Instead, spreading out your investments can help cushion the blow if one market suddenly crashes because of international developments involving BRICS. Understanding how currency fluctuations work can also guide you in choosing safer investments or even making strategic moves when exchange rates become favorable. It's also worth noting that while BRICS has grown in power, it's not immune to its own internal challenges. Each member nation has its own political climate, economic pressures, and historical relationships. For example, India and China have a long history of border disputes, and Russia's political tensions with Western nations add another layer of complexity. Brazil and South Africa face domestic challenges with inequality and political upheaval. These aren't small hurdles. They can weaken the cohesion of BRICS, making it harder for them to act with a single unified vision. When big alliances face internal strife, their ability to manipulate global markets can be less predictable. This unpredictability itself can breed anxiety for those trying to protect their finances in a constantly shifting global economy. Another angle to consider is technology. In our digital age, financial transactions happen across borders in the blink of an eye. Cryptocurrencies, digital payment platforms, and e-commerce have all become mainstream. If a group of nations like BRICS decides to establish its own digital currency or payment network, it could bypass some of the existing global platforms and systems. That might reduce transaction costs and dependency on Western financial intermediaries. But for people used to the stability of established systems, this new frontier might seem risky. Could it lead to unregulated markets or new forms of cyber threats? Possibly. And if so, how do we protect ourselves from potential digital scams or sudden collapses? All these layers, currency manipulation, trade practices, geopolitical strategies, the creation of parallel financial institutions, internal tensions, and the rise of technology interlock to form the big picture of how BRICS might or might not be stealing from you. If the question was simple, we'd have a straightforward answer, but it's not. Economic moves can be perceived as protective or predatory, depending on the vantage point. And as the world becomes more interconnected, the stakes get higher for everyone involved. Here's a critical insight. Global economics isn't just about governments and corporations. It's also about individuals, families, and everyday workers trying to get by. If certain policies lead to lost jobs, reduced income, or a spike in living costs, people will talk about feeling robbed, even if no one is literally hacking into their bank accounts. On the flip side, if these same policies create new opportunities, like more competitive goods, new markets for entrepreneurs, or alternative funding for public projects, some will celebrate BRICS as a forward-thinking group that's helping reshape an outdated system. So, where do we go from here? First, it's essential to keep your eyes open. These issues might seem far away, but global economic shifts can land right at your doorstep. Follow reputable news sources that provide balanced information. Consider talking to financial advisors if you have serious concerns about how to protect your savings. Remember that extremes in rhetoric, like calling everything a scam or calling everything perfectly fine, usually aren't accurate. The truth often lies in the gray area, shaped by competing interests, historical grievances, and genuine aspirations for a fairer world order. Second, don't underestimate the power of personal engagement. Politicians and decision makers do pay attention to the public's concerns, especially when those concerns are voiced consistently and knowledgeably. If people believe that certain policies are detrimental, they can lobby their representatives to take action, or at least to clarify what's going on. The more transparency there is, the less room there is for hidden agendas or manipulative financial practices. Third, as technology evolves, keep an eye on how it merges with geopolitical and economic strategies. Blockchain, decentralized finance, and digital currencies are changing the financial world faster than many of us can track. BRICS could leverage these tools in ways that either liberate financial systems from old constraints or impose new ones. Understanding these developments can give you a head start in adapting to changes, whether that means learning a new skill set or adjusting your investment portfolio. Finally, remember that fear thrives in uncertainty. The notion that BRICS is stealing your money may stem from a genuine place of concern, but it could also be amplified by sensational headlines. That's not to say the worries aren't real, but rather that we should handle them with a balanced perspective. By educating yourself on how economics and politics intertwine, you can better navigate the ups and downs of a global system that's constantly reinventing itself. At the end of the day, we're left with a multifaceted reality. BRICS is undeniably shifting global power balances that can bring opportunities for development and growth. It can also stir worries that established norms are being upended in ways that could harm people who aren't prepared. Whether these actions amount to stealing depends on your viewpoint, your country's economic relationship with BRICS, and how resilient your financial plans are in the face of change. So, is BRICS stealing your money? The most honest answer might be, it's complicated. The best safeguard is knowledge. Stay alert, stay proactive, and keep asking questions. Which policies might affect the industries in your region? How are your investments tied to the global economy? Are your leaders engaging with BRICS in a way that protects local interests? These questions matter, and paying attention to the answers could help you secure your financial future. If you've made it this far, you're clearly interested in the intricate dance of global economics. It's a dance that involves massive sums of money, towering corporate structures, and entire nations jockeying for advantage. but it also impacts people like you and me, individuals trying to build a stable future. The next time you see a headline about BRICS, don't just skim it. Dive deeper. The better we understand these shifting alliances, the better equipped we are to make decisions that protect our own interests. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. Be sure to share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think BRICS is on the verge of revolutionizing the global economy for the better? Or do you see them as a threat to financial stability? Let's get a dialogue going, because these aren't questions with easy answers, and your perspective matters. We've only scratched the surface of how global economic shifts affect your wallet, so don't forget to check out our next video. I'll be digging into more examples of how large-scale alliances can reshape everyday life, from the cost of groceries to the stability of international banking. Until then, stay informed, stay curious, and keep your financial future firmly in your own hands. Our financial world is evolving faster than ever, and it's up to us to stay informed and empowered. Will you stay on the sidelines or step up to shape your financial destiny? Leave a comment so we can keep the conversation going. Let me know your thoughts and questions, and don't forget to watch the next video for even deeper insights on global economic change.